I'll start with my favorite method. If I'm using a 140-pound watercolor paper, I transfer the image with the drawing under the paper. When I transfer sketches, I use low-tack tape, such as painter's tape, so that I don't tear my watercolor paper. First, I tape my sketch to the back of my watercolor paper. Next, I tape the watercolor paper to the window. The light shines through the sketch and I can easily trace the lines. If I were to miss tracing any part of my drawing, the sketch is still taped to the back of the watercolor paper. I can just tape it up again and retrace it on the window. Try to trace onto the watercolor paper with a light hand so that your pencil doesn't mar or dig into the surface. A neat thing about this method is that if I wanted to change the direction the cat is facing, I could just flop the sketch over so that it's facing outwards and the back of the sketch is against the watercolor paper. Then when I trace it, the cat would be facing in the other direction. When it comes time to paint, some of the pencil lines will be washed away by the watercolor and some will be hidden under paint. If there are any lines you want to erase when you are done painting, just be sure the painting is completely dry before you put the eraser on it. Of course, in this case, my rather smudgy window is basically acting as a light box. I did have a light box for many years, one that was large enough for a full sheet of watercolor paper, which is 22 by 30 inches. Eventually I got rid of it because it was taking up too much room and it was easier to use the window instead of setting up the light box. A light box works at night, but this window method doesn't. This second method would work if it's too dark outside to use a window. And sometimes paper might be too thick or too dark to easily trace over. In that case, you can use transfer paper. I've tried a few of the commercial brands out there. They come in different colors. So, for example, if you're transferring onto a dark paper for a pastel or colored pencil piece, you could use a white transfer paper. And it can be used over and over as long as there's still some graphite on the back. What I usually use, though, is a transfer sheet I made up myself by rubbing graphite over one side of a sheet of Denryl. Denryl is a matte sheet of some sort of plastic that's used for ink drawing. Tracing paper works just as well as Denryl, but it isn't as durable. You can use these sheets over and over. Just rub more graphite onto the sheet whenever it needs more. And if you want to transfer a drawing onto a dark sheet of paper, you can make a transfer sheet with white chalk pastel. To use a transfer sheet, you place it over your art paper with the graphite side down. I'm using a piece of gray pastel paper here. As you trace over the lines, you shouldn't use so much pressure that you dig into the art paper, but you have to use enough pressure to transfer the lines well enough to see on the art paper. With this method, you can't see how the transfer is coming along because it's under the sheet in the transfer paper. You can use a different color pen or pencil as you trace. That way the lines you've already traced will be colored, and you'll be sure not to miss transferring any part of the image. In this case, the pastel of my cat covers all the transfer lines, so I don't need to think about having to erase any of them.